The most elegant bottle in the world once had a war record behind it. Chanel No. 5 looked harmless on a dressing table. Clear glass, black letters, a name women trusted. But behind that bottle was a Jewish business family. Chanel tried to push out during Nazi-occupied Paris. Behind that bottle was the Ritz Hotel, where German power moved through gilded halls. Behind that bottle was Hans Günther von Dincklage, the German officer who became Chanel's lover. And behind Coco Chanel's clean black and white image was a file history could not perfume away. Chanel sold women clean elegance. But the documents behind her empire were anything but clean. That is the story the brand never wanted at the center of the room. The public remembers the little black dress, the tweed suit, the pearls, the camellia, the chain strap, the bottle of No. 5 sitting like a perfect object under soft light. But the darker story does not begin with a dress. It begins with ownership. Who owned the perfume? Who controlled the money? Who could use wartime law? Who survived when Paris was occupied? And who came out of the war with her name still glowing? Chanel was not simply a designer with a scandal attached to her. She was a woman who understood image better than almost anyone around her. She knew how to erase excess from a dress. She knew how to turn poverty into discipline. She knew how to make black look expensive, silence look strong, and a woman's body look modern. Then war tested the image. Paris changed. The clients disappeared. The couture house closed. The Ritz became a dangerous address. The perfume stayed valuable. And Chanel, who had spent her life cutting away what did not serve her, stepped into a world where survival, ambition, and betrayal could wear the same coat. To understand how Gabrielle Chanel became Coco Chanel, and how Coco Chanel became a name history still cannot cleanly judge, we cannot start with luxury. We have to start with absence. A dead mother, a vanished father, a convent wall, and a girl who learned that if the world gave you nothing, you had to build a mask sharp enough to cut your way out. Before she was Coco Chanel, she was Gabrielle Chanel. No mirrored staircase, no perfume empire, no little black dress, no name spoken like a luxury code. Just a poor girl placed in a convent orphanage after her mother died and her father left. That was not a childhood built from softness. Aubusine gave her stone walls, strict habits, plain clothes, dark corridors, white linen, black uniforms, and the discipline of a place where emotion had no special value. Later, the world would call Chanel's style modern, simple, elegant, free. But some of that simplicity came from deprivation. She did not invent clean lines in a fantasy salon. She first saw them in a world without ornament. Black, white, order, silence. A girl inside those walls learned that excess belonged to other people. Rich people, protected people. Women who could afford softness because life had not taken it from them first. Gabrielle learned to sew. She learned to watch fabric. She learned what clothing did to women before she knew how to name it. A dress could mark class. A hat could announce marriage. A corset could turn a body into a social instruction. She noticed. That was her first weapon. Observation. She saw the old feminine costume clearly enough to hate it. When she left the convent world, she did not step directly into Parisian greatness. She worked. She sang in small cafes. She tried to become visible in rooms that were not built for girls with no money. The name Coco came from that early performance world, but the deeper transformation was not a nickname. It was a disappearance. Gabrielle had been poor. Coco could be invented. Gabrielle had been abandoned. Coco could abandon first. That difference mattered. The girl from Aubusine understood that identity could be tailored. A name could be shortened, a past could be blurred. A body could be dressed into authority. But authority needed access. And access in Chanel's world was held by men. She would not enter high society through inheritance. She would enter through rooms, lovers, horses, money, hats, and the precise instinct for what powerful women wanted before they knew how to ask. The next door was not a boutique. It was a man's house. And Chanel was watching everything. Chanel's rise was built from talent, but talent alone did not open the first doors. Men did. Etienne Balsam brought Gabrielle Chanel into a world of horses, leisure, wealthy women, country houses, and private rooms where money moved quietly. It was not her world. She entered it as someone dependent, observant, and underestimated. That was useful. People often show more to someone they think is beneath them. Chanel watched the women around Balsam. Their hats were heavy. Their dresses were decorative. Their bodies looked managed by rules they called taste. She saw the problem, then she cut it down. Her first hats were cleaner, sharper, less burdened. Women noticed. Not because Chanel begged for attention, but because the hats did something different. They made the wearer look less trapped. That was the beginning. Then came Arthur Boyd Capel. He gave her money, encouragement, and access to a larger commercial world. With his support, Chanel opened shops and began turning her eye into a business. The shops were small, but the idea was large. A woman did not have to dress like furniture. She could move, she could breathe, she could borrow from men's clothes and look more powerful, not less feminine. Jersey fabric entered her world. Sportswear entered it. Simplicity became a weapon against the old decorative prison of women's fashion. Chanel sold freedom through fabric. Clients came because the clothes changed how they felt inside a room. But the rise had a cost. Chanel learned that intimacy, money, and power could not be separated. A lover could become a lender. A house could become a showroom. A relationship could become a step. She did not float upward, she climbed. Every step taught her something. How rich people behaved, how women competed, how men negotiated, how business hid behind charm, and how a name could become more valuable than the person who carried it. By the time Chanel became known, the poor girl from Aubazine had nearly vanished from public view. In her place stood a woman dressed in control. But fashion alone would not make her immortal. A hat could begin the story. A dress could sharpen it. The object that made her name global came in a bottle, and that bottle would one day lead back to war. Chanel No. 5 did not look like other perfumes. That was part of its power. No romantic name, no decorative bottle, no sentimental little fantasy, just a number. A clear square bottle, a white label, black letters, Chanel. It looked less like a perfume and more like a decision. The scent itself was developed with perfumer Ernest Beau, but genius is never enough to build an empire. A formula needs factories, distribution, capital, contracts, men who know how to turn desire into global business. That brought in the Wertheimer family. Pierre and Paul Wertheimer had the resources to manufacture and sell Chanel No. 5 at a scale Chanel could not reach alone. The business arrangement made the perfume powerful, but it also created a wound that never closed. The bottle carried her name. The money did not fully belong to her. That mattered to Chanel. She had escaped poverty by controlling surfaces, rooms, names, and bodies. Now her most powerful creation lived inside a structure she did not fully control. She had fame. The Wertheimers had the machinery. No 5 became a phenomenon. Women bought it as if they were buying access to a new version of themselves. It was not only scent, it was Paris in glass, desire in glass, modernity in glass, Chanel in glass. But behind the ritual were papers, contracts, shares, percentages, control. The public saw the bottle. Chanel saw what she believed had been taken from her. That resentment did not stay small. It waited. As the 1930s darkened, Europe moved toward catastrophe. Jewish families and Jewish businesses faced danger that changed every contract, every asset, every signature. The Wertheimers saw the danger coming and prepared. Chanel saw something else too, an opening. The perfume remained beautiful. The business behind it became vulnerable. Soon Paris would fall. The couture house would close. The Ritz would fill with German authority, and the bottle of No. 5 would become more than a symbol of luxury. It would become the object at the center of Chanel's most troubling wartime move. When Germany occupied Paris, the city did not stop being beautiful. That was part of the horror. The buildings remained, the hotels remained, the restaurants remained for those with access. But power had changed hands. The Ritz Hotel became one of the most dangerous luxury addresses in Europe. German officers moved through its corridors. Political calculation entered dining rooms. Private suites held conversations that ordinary Parisians could not afford to overhear. Chanel lived there. The detail matters because the Ritz was not neutral space. It was comfort beside occupation. Outside, Paris faced rationing, fear surveillance, arrests, and uncertainty. Inside the Ritz, luxury survived under new management. Champagne could still be poured in a city where silence had become a survival skill. Chanel had closed her couture house at the beginning of the war. Many workers lost their jobs. The old salon quieted. The public version of Chanel, the designer of modern women, seemed to retreat. But Chanel herself did not vanish. She remained close to power. Then Hans Günther von Dincklage entered the story. He was German, connected, an officer with intelligence ties. His relationship with Chanel was not just private romance. In occupied Paris, no relationship with a German officer could be only private. It gave her protection. It gave her access. It gave history a reason to keep asking questions. Chanel had spent her life using rooms to survive. The room now was the Ritz, and the men inside it were far more dangerous than the patrons of her early fashion world. The old skills still worked: silence, control, selective loyalty, a talent for standing near power without looking owned by it. But war changes the meaning of everything. A dinner becomes evidence. A lover becomes a file. A hotel suite becomes a question. Was Chanel surviving? Was she calculating? Was she collaborating? The answers remain contested, but the documents did not disappear. Her name moved through intelligence reports and post-war investigations. Her wartime life became attached to words the brand could never make elegant. And the darkest part was still ahead. Because Chanel's relationship with German power did not only touch her private life, it touched the bottle. Hans Günther von Dincklage was not a footnote. He was the door through which Chanel's wartime story became more than rumor. His position and connections placed him close to German intelligence circles. Chanel's association with him placed her in a dangerous record. Once a name enters wartime files, it does not return easily to perfume ads and fashion photographs. Chanel had always known how to read men. Balsan opened one world. Capel opened another. Von Dincklage opened a world where access and suspicion became inseparable. In that world, the old rules of style meant little. What mattered was who knew whom, who could move across borders, who could deliver a message, who could be useful to power. Some accounts and documents connected Chanel to German intelligence operations, including efforts that involved her old social connection to Winston Churchill. Historians have debated the exact depth of her role, her motives, and how far her cooperation went. But the central fact remains hard enough. Chanel was close to German power in occupied Paris. Her name was not outside the wartime record. That alone damaged the clean image. The little black dress now had another blackness behind it. The suit had a file beside it. The bottle had an officer's shadow across it. Still, Chanel's story cannot be reduced to one room or one man. That would be too easy. Her wartime conduct moved across romance, ambition, protection, business, and survival. The problem is that all of those motives can exist at once. That is what makes the story harder and more disturbing. Because Chanel's greatest skill was not only design, it was self-preservation. She had preserved herself through poverty, through abandonment, through male power, through class barriers, through business deals, through grief and reinvention. During the occupation, that instinct did not vanish. It sharpened, and then it found its way back to Chanel No. 5. The perfume was still a fortune. The Wertheimers were still the family behind that fortune, and Nazi law had made Jewish ownership vulnerable. Chanel had a chance to act. She took it. Chanel's fight over No. 5 did not begin with the Nazis, but occupation gave it a weapon. For years, Chanel had believed she deserved more control over the perfume that carried her name. The Wertheimer family had built the business, expanded it, and held the power she resented. Before the war, this was a commercial conflict. During the war, it became a moral one. The Wertheimers were Jewish. Nazi policy targeted Jewish property. Chanel, classified as Aryan under the occupying system, attempted to use the situation to gain control of Parfum Chanel. The papers matter here. This was not only desire, it was an action. She argued that the company was still in Jewish hands and should be transferred. She presented herself as the rightful priority behind the perfume. Her name was on the bottle. Her creation had made the fortune. Now she wanted the legal machinery of occupation to deliver what business negotiations had not. But the Wertheimers had prepared. Before fleeing, they transferred control of Femme Chanel to Félix Amiot, a non-Jewish French industrialist. That move protected the company from seizure under anti-Jewish measures. After the war, control returned to the Wertheimers. Chanel's attempt failed, but failure did not erase the attempt. That is the wound. The bottle remained elegant. The document remained ugly. For consumers, Chanel No. 5 would later mean luxury, femininity, cinema, celebrity, and desire. It would sit in bedrooms, department stores, hotel bathrooms, magazines, and films. But beneath that surface was a wartime fight over ownership during one of history's most dangerous moments for Jewish families and businesses. This is where the story stops being only about Chanel. It becomes about luxury itself. How many beautiful objects are protected from the stories that made them valuable? How often does a brand survive by making its documents less visible than its packaging? Paris would soon be liberated. The German officers would lose their rooms. The collaborators would be questioned. The frightened would accuse. The powerful would explain. And Chanel, who had survived by standing close to power, would have to answer what that closeness meant. When Paris was liberated, beauty did not protect everyone. Names were listed. Rooms were remembered. Relationships were examined. Women accused of collaboration were punished in public. Men who had made deals looked for excuses. Those who had survived occupation now had to survive the judgment that followed. Chanel was questioned. Her relationship with von Dincklage could not be ignored. Her life at the Ritz could not be erased. Her wartime connections had left enough smoke for investigators to look for fire. But she was released. No trial destroyed her. No final legal judgment froze the story in one clean sentence. Instead, Chanel left for Switzerland. That departure became another closed door. Switzerland gave her distance from Paris, distance from questions, and distance from the mood of liberation. She stayed away while the fashion world shifted without her. Dior rose. The new look arrived. The silhouette changed. Paris wanted volume, romance, and post-war fantasy. Chanel, who had once made women modern by cutting away the old structure, now watched another designer define the new one. For a time, she looked finished. The couture house was closed. Her name remained powerful through perfume, but her authority in fashion weakened. The past sat behind her. The future no longer seemed to need her. Yet Chanel was not a woman who accepted being placed in the past. She had spent her life refusing every place assigned to her. Poor girl, abandoned child, kept woman, milliner, dressmaker, exile. She returned to the same method again. Control the surface. Control the silhouette. Control the story. While the wartime questions remained unresolved, the business world found a way forward. Agreements with the Wertheimers stabilized the perfume empire. Chanel's name continued to sell. The world wanted luxury again. After war, clean lines can look like healing. That was dangerous, because clean lines can also hide. Chanel waited until the moment was ready. Then she returned not with confession, not with apology, and not with an explanation of the Ritz. She returned with a suit. In 1954, Coco Chanel reopened her fashion house. France did not welcome her like a returning queen. Critics were cold. Some saw an aging designer trying to enter a world that had moved beyond her. Dior had changed the post-war body. Younger designers were rising. Chanel's wartime reputation remained uncomfortable. But Chanel did not return with softness. She returned with construction. A jacket, a skirt, braided trim, a chain sewn into the hem. A shape that moved with the body instead of forcing the body into display. The Chanel suit was not sentimental, it was controlled. It gave women polish without stiffness, wealth without excess, authority without theatricality. French critics hesitated, but American buyers and editors understood its power quickly. For women entering new public and professional spaces, the suit became a uniform of modern control. The comeback worked. Slowly, then firmly, Chanel became relevant again. Photographs returned. Clients returned. The brand returned. The file did not vanish, but the silhouette competed with it. That was Chanel's gift and danger. She could make the surface so strong that people stopped asking what stood behind it. Every fitting became a new act of recovery. Every jacket moved the story away from the Ritz. Every suit placed her back in the conversation as a designer, not only a wartime suspect. The world was willing to look again because the clothes still worked. That is the uncomfortable truth. Talent can complicate judgment, beauty can delay accountability, commerce can outlast scandal. Chanel worked until the end. She controlled rooms, models, fabric, image, and entrance. Her mirrored staircase became a stage where she could watch without being fully seen. That suited her perfectly. But the old record waited. It did not interrupt every fashion show. It did not stop every sale. It did not erase every achievement. It simply remained. After her death, the brand would become even larger, cleaner, brighter, and more profitable than the woman herself. But the question stayed beneath the fabric. Can a legacy be elegant if the evidence under it is not? Coco Chanel died in 1971 at the Ritz. That fact closes the circle. The hotel of luxury, the hotel of occupation, the hotel of German power. The hotel where she had lived through the most controversial chapter of her life became the final room of her story. After her death, Chanel grew larger than Chanel. The brand became global. Noma 5 endured, the suit endured, the little black dress became part of fashion language. The double C became a symbol of money, taste, restraint, and a certain idea of Paris cleaned for public consumption. Then the files kept returning. Books reopened the occupation years. Historians revisited the Abwehr connections. Exhibitions placed fashion beside wartime evidence. New material complicated the picture further. Some records deepened suspicions. Other records suggested the story might not fit one simple label. The result was not innocence. It was not a neat conviction either. It was something harder for audiences. A split legacy. Chanel the designer changed how women dressed. Chanel the wartime figure remains morally troubling. Both truths stand in the same room. That is why her story still matters. If we turn her only into a villain, we lose the force of what she made. If we turn her only into a genius, we hide the cost of what she did. The truth is not clean, and clean was always Chanel's specialty. She made black look modern, she made poverty look disciplined, she made restraint look rich, she made women look free. But freedom in the boutique did not erase compromise in the hotel. A bottle of Chanel No. 5 can still be beautiful. A suit can still be brilliant. A black dress can still change the way a woman enters a room. But beauty does not cancel evidence. It only makes evidence harder to face. That was Coco Chanel's secret double life. Not one woman pretending to be two. One name carrying two histories. One stitched into fabric. One written in files. One sold under bright lights. One waiting in the dark behind the bottle.